I'm Brian Van, sportbiketrackgear.com, and today we're going to install the HealTech QuickShifter Easy on our 2015 STG Yamaha YZF-R3. The HealTech QuickShifter Easy is a pretty interesting mod you can do to your bike. Okay, we have very few parts here. This is the module itself. You're able to use an Android phone to adjust the settings in this, or you can download an app from the Google Play Store, like I'm going to do with my iPhone, and control this through Bluetooth. Pretty cool stuff. It has the ability to work for either standard or reverse shift. Here is the sensor. There are multiple ways to install the sensor. We're going to cover that in a minute. This will be mounted here, wiring routed up under the seat. Module goes under the seat. Comes with cable ties to secure it. We've got one Scotch lock. I see a jumper plug here. And then we have a bike-specific harness. This will be, of course, we're going to have our power and ground connections, and then we're going to be connected to the ignition coils on the motorcycle. And this will be interrupting the ignition, and that allows the gearbox to relax, okay, and engage. When I come back, we're going to begin by installing the QuickShifter sensor. Okay, we're going to open up by installing the actual sensor. That is, this can be mounted in multiple ways, okay? It's going to depend upon your bike and how your rear sets, your shift knuckle, all those things are set up. Good instructions. They're very clear, multiple images. Looking at it, for the R3, the best choice for us is going to be mounting it using the bolt for the shift knuckle. They actually supply a brand new bolt. There are some conical washers. If needed a spacer, that won't be necessary on this motorcycle. So we're going to go ahead and choose that method. That will be the most effective for the R3. In order to facilitate that, we have to first remove that stock fastener, and we're going to go ahead and take the shift knuckle all the way off right now. We will then remove the sprocket cover. While we're here, we need to get the harness routed nicely. Okay, that is going to be a key step with the installation of the sensor. If you don't mount the harness correctly, leaving enough slack in the wire to allow for both up and down shifts, you could damage the harness, which would then, in turn, obviously, create performance issues with the QuickShifter and or unit failure. So let's go ahead and get the sprocket cover loosened up here. The harness, there's a stock harness for the bike that is already threaded through this, and we're going to need to manipulate that a little bit so we can get the cover off of the bike. And I think we have a attachment point here where it comes together with that harness up here. Rotate it out, and there we go. So this is going to be really a solid choice for routing here. It'll allow us to get that harness up into position, so we're then able to mount it to the module up in the trunk area of the bike. While we're here, we may as well go ahead and begin removing some of the body work that we'll need to remove the fuel tank, as that will be one of the steps. We have to gain access to the ignition coils as we install the actual module harness itself. And these parts will need to come off in order to do that, so I can get started there. And you can see this gives me some pretty nice access to bring that harness up under. This one popped out here. There are a couple of Christmas tree clips that hold that on. They actually go into the rubber grommets here, hold it in place. You can see now we have really solid access to work with and mount this real nicely. Okay, now that we have all of our access, I want to get this mocked up. All right, I want to make sure that as I secure this harness and feed it up and through there, that I've done everything that I need to make sure that I'm not going to create a possible issue in the future with misinstallation. So let's get our shift knuckle back on. Always remember, the 90-degree angle is so critical here, right? That's the relationship between the knuckle and the rod, all right? You know those mechanic shows on TV where everything goes super easy, right? That's because there's multiple takes and, you know, they spend a lot of time mocking stuff up. They probably have a professional come in and actually do all the work, and then they come in at the very end. With this, I have definitely spent some time, you know, kind of back and forth mocking this up to make sure I get the best possible routing of this, because this is really important. And what I've landed on is this, all right? I want the wiring harness to roll over the top of the shift knuckle, like so, okay? I am then going to, and this is not in the instructions, this is a me thing, can be kind of picky sometimes. I'm going to drill a little hole in the shift knuckle and use a wire or cable tie to secure the harness right here, okay? Because I want this to turn out really nice. I don't like creating possible problems down the line. When I get out to ride, it's really important to me that my bike works correctly. Okay, let's take a look at this. I'm gonna get it mocked up here. I wanna hold this over in that direction. Yeah, I mean, you see that, we're gonna have no pull on that harness, right? And that is critical. You wanna have enough of a loop down here. Can you see that, Steve? That you are not overtaxing anything. Okay, so to begin with, I'm going to rotate that out of the way. I'm going to find a nice spot right up in here. You don't have to do this if you don't want to, but I'm going to. This is where cobalt tip drill bits come in really handy. When you have a good drill bit, you don't need a lot of speed. And when I come back, I'll have drilled through this, and we'll go ahead and secure the harness for installation of the module. All right, let's continue securing the harness, feeding it up to the under seat area of the bike. Little extra time with tasks like this can really go a long way towards making sure that you've got a trouble-free modification for the long term, and that is really important. Last thing you want to do is be on a ride and lose precious riding time because you cut a couple corners on the install. All right, so now we've got kind of a harness cover here. We're going to take advantage of that and feed this through there. So let's go ahead and the R3 is actually a pretty easy bike to work on, end of the day. Okay, get that routed in there, put this back together. Tang back in place, trim any cable ties for length, and now you can see we can secure this the rest of the way, you know, as we begin to take the seat and disassemble the tail area to work on that. Now we're ready to go ahead and reinstall the sprocket cover. feed the wiring harness through the notch in the bottom of the cover, like so. And, right through the one on the top. Get the bolt holes all lined up. Put this back on. You'll notice I did remove the reservoir, the overflow bottle, the rest of the way. That was not a very difficult process. And I'd recommend doing the same. It's just going to give you a little more operating room. My bike is already set up with GP shift. That's my preferred pattern. Got a set of Woodcraft adjustable rear sets on my little R3. All right, got the cover in place, and now we'll begin with the shift knuckle and the sensor. Okay, now it's time to install the sensor itself. Let's go ahead and get those conical washers on here. Still got Loctite on the bolt. We're good to go there. Route it over the shift shaft. And let's make sure that I get that back on in the same position that I had it. I want to maintain that 90-degree relationship between the shift knuckle and the rod. Start the bolt. Torque on this recommended 5 Newton meters. That converts to between 3 and 4 foot-pounds, which is obviously not much. They also recommend you do not attempt to rotate the sensor after the bolt has been tightened, as that can cause damage to the sensor, so be cognizant of that. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and utilize the hole I drilled in the shift knuckle, right? Thread this through. And this is just really going to help hold it here in this area. I don't want it moving around in this area, so this is going to secure it here at the shift knuckle and allow it to flex where I've got the loop at the very bottom. I think this will be the most effective way to get this mounted on the bike. A little bend in this so I can get this to kind of come around once I get it through there. Like so. Okay. No restriction at all. Trim that. Let's take one last look. You can clearly see we're going to have 0 issues with the wire pulling. Now, we need to lower the bike, remove the seat, the gas tank, and get access to the ignition coils. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and remove the seats on the motorcycle and establish a mounting point for the module, and then work the harness into position as well. Passenger seat is easy to get off on this bike. You just go ahead and use the key, releases it, slide it back. Driver's seat, we need to take off this trim panel in order to gain access. You can See, the bike's a little dirty. We tried to have Dalton clean it, but he didn't get it done. A little rain riding in this at the end of last season. Couple hex fasteners here are going to hold the seat in place, the rider's seat. Get those bad boys off. Like so. And off comes your rider's seat. Now we've got all kinds of room there. Next up is going to be fuel tank removal. Pull the trim panel here off the side. Kind of gave you a rundown on this on the other side. We've got two 4mm Allens, and then we have a couple of Christmas trees that are part of the trim panel itself. Get in there and release those. Like so. And now for the gas tank itself. Got two mounting points back here. We have, and then mounting point up here as well. Not sure if we can get this by the closeout panels here on the top, but we'll certainly give it a shot. This bike has a metal tank that is covered by a plastic panel. I'm going to go ahead and remove the plastic panel. We don't have to worry about scratching the tank at all. Two Christmas trees, hold it down there. Pull up on it, put it to the side. And now we're ready to deal with the fuel tank itself. Mounts here, and then two mounts here in the back. Fasteners are all out. And the tank itself. Okay, now our ignition coils are right up here at the very front. So, realistically, we could get away without completely pulling the tank off the bike. So I don't feel any need to disconnect any of the hoses to the tank. We should be able to work with the coils up here without issue. Okay, the ignition coils for the bike are all the way up at the front. There is a tray essentially that holds them on, like so. Two bolts right here. I took those out. I've unplugged each of the spark plug wires. That's going to give us some really good access to the ignition coils themselves. With the harness install, at the end of the day, what you're going to be doing, okay, in very simple terms here. The 12-volt power supply to each of the coils is going to be a shared power supply, okay? It's going to be two wires, right, with a junction. You're going to disconnect both of the power feed wires from the coils. You're going to need to isolate which ones feed the power using either a voltmeter or a test light. We're going to use a test light. You will then plug in one of the two 12-volt supplies to this connector here. You'll isolate the other one with tape, shrink tubing, whatever you prefer, so it is out of the way, safe, and it cannot ground out. You will then install these onto the power supply ends of the coils. This wire right here will be attached to the ground for one of the coils using the provided Scotch lock. So that's pretty simple. We then have an eyelet for a chassis ground. Let's go ahead and take off the coils completely so that we can unplug them without damaging anything. Isolate the 12-volt power supply and continue on with the installation of this harness. Okay, to isolate which is the power feed and which is the ground of the coil, you need to have the coil disconnected. Got the switch on, the ignition is on, and you can see this terminal is hot. The other is not. Of course, I have the test light hooked to a solid chassis ground. Let's take a look at this and see we have a red with a black tracer. And you can actually see how the other wire that is going to feed the other coil literally jumps right off of this power feed and goes over to the other side. So let's go ahead and get the key off. We don't short anything out. And let's get the other side prepped and disassembled here as well. And you can see this is going to be the power feed here, right? Should be the same wire. Let's go ahead and verify that. Yep. You can go one step further if you choose. And just make sure. Okay, so those are the two that need to be disconnected. One will be isolated with tape. I'm going to isolate the one on the brake side of the bike. And of course, as we wrap everything up, I will also secure this out of the way using cable ties so that we don't have any issues grounding out. Okay, now let's go ahead and take a minute and let's get this harness fed up into position before we begin to connect anything up there. It'll be more difficult to get it into position once you've started making the connections up the coils. Here's where I'm going to decide what I'm going to do with that chassis ground. Do I want to try and ground it up at the front? Am I going to try and get it back here at the battery? Okay, harness is up here. I think what I'm going to do for the chassis ground is I'm going to use one of the fuel tank mount bolts right up here. Super accessible. I already checked. The eyelet's going to allow for the mounting bolt to pass through, so we're good to go there. This is the wire that they supply a Scotch lock with, so you can attach it to the coil ground, all right? I'm not really a big fan of Scotch locks, so we're going to go a different route, and I'll show you what I want to do. I've cut the insulation for the ground wire for the coil on the left side back, so I have good access to it. I am now going to kind of pull the harness up here a little bit and pick a nice centered spot. It's going to allow me to work on it. And we'll strip this back. I think I've got a better solution than just a standard Scotch lock. Got some real nice shrinkable butt connectors that work phenomenally. I've been using these for years. They seal up nicely, good firm connections, so we're going to go with that in lieu of the Scotch lock. A little more effort, but I think you're going to get a better result long term. Scotch locks are good for quick connections, but end of the day, I don't feel they have the reliability that you get out of this butt connector, or if you really want to get fancy, you could go ahead and solder the connection, right? Either one of those is going to be far superior to the Scotch lock. And all that said, if you really want to use what they've given you, all right, just be careful with the install, you'll be good to go. And if you do a good job with the install, you should have a reliable, good, long service life. Okay, crimp that down. Check the security of it, feels really good. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and shrink the first part of it down. All right, and now the second part. This is the part that will now hook to our coil. Always check the security of it. That feels really good too. Let's go ahead and shrink that down. Okay, that's shrunk around the wire real nicely. In my opinion, that's just it's going to serve you better long term, right, than the alternative, which would have been the supplied Scotch lock. Let's go ahead and do a nice job taping this up, and they'll be ready to plug the coils in. Ground is plugged back into that coil. And I'm going to take the common 12-volt supply here, and we will plug that into the red wire. Make sure that the protective cover slides over the other so that we have a good strong seal here. You don't want any issues with corrosion. All right, get that slid together. Everything looks good there. And now we're ready to connect the new power supply wire to the coil on the left side. Got the one for the coil on the right side. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and get that bracket mounted up. The ground wire right here. Got a metal top hat washer there, and of course the tab on the frame is metal fasteners. I mean, this is going to be a really nice spot to put that. Clean install. Make sure your ground is good and tight. Mounting bolt on the other side. And we'll be ready to put our gas tank back on. Got to secure a little bit of the harness here. Make sure everything's out of the way, but by and large, got a pretty clean install going right now. Make sure you plug in your spark plug wires before you put your tank back on. All right, we've got the harness all routed down the left side here, right? We'll secure it at a couple more points using cable ties. Now let's get it plugged into the module. I really like the quality of the components. The wiring harnesses are nice. The module looks great, certainly watertight. Weatherproof connector. All right, now I really don't want to put it up in here. I feel like we're going to be too tight on the shift sensor wire. And you know, kind of looking around a little bit, a nice spot is going to be right here on the control unit, and that's where I'm going to go. So let's go ahead and expose the adhesive. And stick that literally right on the control unit, like so. And now we can take our wiring harness and just kind of tidy this up in here. And at the end of the day, a couple cable ties, we have ourselves a real clean install. I'm going to button up the bodywork on the bike. We'll leave the seat off just so we can have a look at the module, and we're going to go ahead and get the app on my phone and begin dialing in the QuickShifter. Okay, it's all installed, right? There is an app that you're able to install. We've got Android. If it's a QSC, if the module says QSC on it, okay, it's going to work with your Android devices. If it's an iQSC, it's going to work with Apple as well as Android devices. There's an easy to use app. There's a couple of adjustments you need to make before you really take the bike out for a road test. These are very clearly outlined in the instructions, okay? You're going to want to follow this step by step. Follow the process. This is pretty intuitive. If you're, a mobile device user, you've used different apps before, this is going to be the easy part of the job. I've done that. I've basically set the upper end and the lower end of the RPM range. Now I want to take the motorcycle out, take it for a road test, and see if we need to make any adjustments. Once again, that is all outlined very clearly in the instructions. When we get done with the road test, I'll let you know if there were any adjustments I had to make to get this to work right. We'll cover that, and we'll close this video up. Okay, literally a couple of very minor adjustments, right? With this, the app worked really good. It was clean. It Bluetooth connected easy, no problem. It looks like we've got two different types of modules, the older version, and we've had this kit here for a little while, the QSE, right, Android compatible, the iQSE, which would be the newer version. Beyond that, all same functionality, would have connectivity with the Apple devices as well as the Android. Super minor adjustments, and I gotta be honest with you, it really made riding the little R3 a lot more fun. Even on the street, it's cool for sure. You go to use this on track days, it'd be great. If you're a track day rider and you have a different bike, great mod, super easy to do. Let's say you don't want to hook up a fuel controller, buy a whole quick shift kit, all these modules and stuff. You just really want that functionality. You can literally buy this. The install on it, I mean, you watch the video, you'll see probably not the easiest install in the entire world, okay? But at the end of the day, you watch the video, you read the instructions, you take your time, you do a good clean job, and you're gonna really enjoy the end result. This is the HealTech QuickShifter Easy Install. I'm Brian Van, sportbiketrackgear.com.